Well, this is an exciting opportunity for me because I love doing global conversations. So here we are, guy originally from Canada, now in Los Angeles, speaking to Nigeria, which is fantastic, and Dr. Ola Brown. Welcome to the Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you, and it's great to be here. It's great to connect with you again and to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure, privilege to meet you in person in Davos. That was super nice, and now to get you on here and show why you really are a leader who cares. We'll prove it to them on this conversation. So so again, welcome, Dr. Brown. If you can just briefly introduce yourself, and I usually have to tell men this more than women because they immediately go to what they do as a job, but we want to know a little bit about who you are. I want to know what the meaning of your first name really is. Is it pronounced Orakunin or Okunrin?
My name is Ola, and Ola is a name from the Yoruba language. It means wealth. Um, so yeah, my that's the meaning of my name. What I do for a living is I run the largest sector focused fund focused on fintech and health tech in Africa. And we make early stage investments in entrepreneurs and founders who are building highly scalable and impactful businesses.
Okay, I'm going to
My
pause you
background
for a
is
minute. I'm going to pause you for a minute. I'm really good at
okay.
interrupting, by the way,
Yeah,
and
okay.
we're going to get to that because it's really important. I need you back on video though, and I want to ask you a little bit to tell me about who you are, family, where you're from originally, where you are now, things like that. Maybe something you've never told anybody you want to tell the world. That's kind of cool too. So share a little bit about that.
About who I am.
Yeah.
So I'm a founder of a company, and beyond that, I don't do much outside work, to be honest, I have to say. I mean, I think that there's sort of probably three types of people in the world. There's people that are very, very dedicated to their work and spend most of their hours doing work that they feel matters. I feel like there's a lot of people that have accepted that they're not like that work orientated and have a lot of interesting hobbies outside work. And then there's the missing middle that kind of wants to be the first group of people that are very focused on work, but they like their free time a lot, so they don't. And I'm kind of at the, very, very work centric. So most of my life and most of the hours of my day are consumed with the work that I do at HealthCap, and I'm perfectly comfortable not really doing that much outside work. I do a bit of yoga as a hobby, but that's kind of it really. My life is mostly consumed by work, so it's not there's not so much of a distinction between who I am and what I spend most of my hours doing.
Which is a wonderful thing because when you enjoy your work, then it's really not work for the
Hmm.
definition. And I can totally relate to that because I love what I do as well. What about family? Do you have family in Nigeria, other places? Can you share a little bit about that?
So I'm married, no kids, and I'm married to an accountant. He teaches Microsoft Excel and financial modeling in Lagos, and that's where we live with a house plan.
Well, I can relate to that too, being a CPA that used to work at Deloitte. I can relate to him also. Um, um, what were you like as a kid or a teenager? Were you somebody that was interested in science projects? Were you saving money to invest or things like that nature? Or were you into sports, music? What were you like?
Think I was an extraordinarily boring kid. I was probably neurodivergent, although like it wasn't like diagnosed, but like I was always kind of reading quietly and not quite connecting with people around me. So I think, yeah, if I grew up today, they'd probably like diagnose me with some kind of spectrum disorder because I was quite a loner as a child, really absorbed in books.
Any particular type of genre books?
Started with fiction, but then, I stopped reading fiction probably about 9, 10 years old, and I'm focused on more technical science books.
No, very cool. Your journey started, I noticed, education-wise, you got bachelor degrees, two bachelor degrees in medicine and surgery, and then you started working in acute med. And then I found it really interesting, but not surprising after speaking to you in Davos internationally. You had an opportunity with the Japanese Mech Scholarship, focusing on research and around stem
Mhm.
cells. With all of that, what were you envisioning for yourself? Where were you thinking this was going to go to?
So I definitely knew that I wanted to do something else outside the day-to-day sort of patient care aspects of medicine. But when you've trained your whole life to be a doctor, and most doctors are doctoring, um, it's very difficult to decide what you want to do. So people start saying, oh, maybe you could go into the pharmaceutical industry or go into medical research. That's like the only alternative career available to you. So I did try that for a year. And it was during that year that I really started sort of crystallizing that I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
And stem cells. I mean, I can't imagine early on you were thinking, "Hey, stem cells." How did that Japanese opportunity come about, and was it something that you were specifically looking for?
It's actually a kind of sad story, to be honest. And I'm going to only tell the real story on this podcast. Um,
Well, we prefer the real
I
versus the pretend story, so that's good.
So the real story is that the pastor of my church, when I was in university, really liked Japan and really wanted to be around people that spoke Japanese. And I had a crush on him, so I learned Japanese. But then, like, he got married to somebody else, and I decided since I already speak Japanese now, I should do something with it. So I decided to move to Japan. And I applied, and obviously my Japanese was good enough to pass the exams and get in.
That is a cool, real story. I like that. And you had a crush on him. So how did your husband win over him?
Yeah, that was many, many years later. So
Okay.
I got married. I got married over probably about 10 years later, 10 years after I left university.
So when he sees this video, will he find out that you had a crush on the guy?
So I told him that
Oh,
story.
good. Um, interesting. And you speak Japanese now?
Yeah, so not as much as I used to before, but I can get by.
Wow, that's great. I can't wait to go out for sushi with you. It'd be fantastic. Uh, so, our firm, Fifth Element, we founded it on the basis that leaders in their organizations will always do better when they're doing good. And it seems to me, in different ways, you were clearly an early leader in that. You founded Flying Doctors Nigeria, which is fascinating, as well as, I believe, Green Tree Investment, and then you earned your master's in finance, your PhD in finance, not to mention publishing books. I don't know what you do in your spare time, but and articles and reports on impact investing in healthcare. Pretty impressive, all jokes aside. Was healthcare always an interest for you from way back? And was there an inflection point prior to bring healthcare and economics together?
Um, I think, working just in healthcare, I started to realize that a lot of the healthcare problems, particularly in Africa, were economic. They were just low budget. So when you think about American healthcare system, for example, it's over $9,000 per person per capita spent on healthcare. When you think about the UK, there's $4,000 per person allocated to healthcare. When you think about the countries like Norway, for instance, that have amazing healthcare, there's $7,000 per person on healthcare. Most countries in Africa have like $1 or $2 per person. So there was a direct correlation between sort of poverty and the standards of healthcare. And that's really what, the space that I wanted to focus on, trying to find low cost, scalable innovations for sort of the people that don't earn enough to be able to afford healthcare. So looking at how to make investing in innovation that makes healthcare more affordable and more accessible.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And when you founded Flying Doctors Nigeria, was it before you started getting into the investment in world?
Before, yeah. Yeah.
And
So I
what
started a company before I became an investor.
Yeah, and how did you think of, hey, let's start flying doctors? How did that happen?
I was reasonably good at flying. I was taking my private pilot's license when I was practicing as a doctor. And, I was like, there could be something here where I could bring emergency medicine and flight transport or flying together, like two things that I really liked to do. And there was a air ambulance company and a large emergency services company in Kenya, but there was none in Nigeria. So I thought, this could be something that I could start. Like I at least have some kind of background in acute and emergency care. So I have like some expertise there. Plus I know about aviation. So even though I don't know that much about business, at least I know the technical stuff in the business I can probably learn along the way.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So did you recruit doctors to join in the effort, or were you like
Yeah.
were you Wonder Woman, flying around as
Oh no.
type of thing? And how did that
So
happen? How
we
did
we
you
have doctors on staff.
and did you have planes donated, or how did it work?
So it wasn't a charity, it was a for-profit company. So we had clients that paid.
Yeah, pretty amazing. I think when you live in LA, you think about how you can turn it into a show or a movie. That's the first thing you think about. So I could see it now. Dr. Ola, flying doctor, or something to that effect. Um, could, could be a great branding. Going after the impact investors. It's fascinating. They say the fourth industrial revolution is about tech, and specifically now AI is going fast and furious. But they also say the fifth revolution is about humanity. Can you tell us about the exciting work you're doing as founder of HealthCap Africa? What the vision is, what the mission is, and how it all works? The venture capital assets you have. Tell us all about it.
Venture capital is, I think, the most impactful asset class in the world. Venture capital in the 1970s, the levels of innovation in Europe and Japan and America were roughly the same. But 40, 50 years later, there's a clear leader, and that's America. And what did America do that Japan, rest of Asia, and Europe didn't do? They sort of innovated this new asset class or this new form of financial engineering called venture capital. And venture capital backed companies now account for nearly 50% of total stock market capitalization in America. It's incredible, such a small industry with such a massive impact. When you look at net new jobs, for example, you find, venture backed companies are sort of leading. When you look at sort of Donald Trump's inauguration, for example, practically all of the leaders, business leaders around him were all tech leaders. They were all venture-backed leaders. Um, some of the biggest CEOs and the most sort of recognizable CEOs in America are all venture capital-backed CEOs. Um, so it's an asset class that really punches above its weight in terms of jobs, in terms of contribution to GDP, in terms of contributing to market capitalization. And our mission is really to bring about that same kind of transformation in Africa in health tech and fintech, which we believe are our key sectors, health and wealth, for the well-being of sort of any continent or any group of citizens.
No, I love it. And how do you balance that with your infrastructure class?
So when I look at the big American firms that I really admire, like Carlyle and KKR and Blackstone and BlackRock and Fidelity and AllianceBernstein, we don't have multi-asset class firms in Africa in the same way. We have people that specialize in private credit, or people that specialize in private equity, or people that specialize, and they're usually these tiny firms. And what we want to build is, the KKR for African healthcare, where we have sort of several asset classes under the same brand. And we think that that's a much more sustainable strategy.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And there just seems to be, with all the relationships we have in Africa too now around talent and impact and everything, it just seems to be a sky's the limit opportunity.
Hmm.
Can you expand on how
Absolutely.
excited you are about the sky's the limit opportunity?
Um, so I think, whenever I talk about Africa, I give people three numbers. The first number is 28, which is the age where you see the most rapid economic growth. There's a professor at the INSEAD in Paris, in France, not Paris, who speaks about demographics and economic growth, and she has calculated through her research that 28 is actually, the average age in a country that you see the most rapid economic growth, and India is just getting there now, and you can see the economic growth has taken off in India. And Africa is just on that slope rising to 28. So that's one of the numbers that makes me enthusiastic about Africa. The second one is 2100. By the year 2100, Africa will surpass China in terms of population, becoming the second. Nigeria alone, sorry, not Africa. Nigeria alone will surpass China in terms of population, becoming the second largest country in the entire world. And by 2100, Africa will be 8 times bigger than China in terms of population. So these are sort of these numbers, 28, 8 times, and 2100 are the numbers that really make me think about, the sky is the limit, and this idea that really Africa is potentially sort of one of the next global powerhouses in terms of economic growth.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that because I think it's brilliant, and people, I don't, I think they're starting to realize that the
Mhm.
the demographics of the talent in Africa is so significantly youth, um, and it is India too. China actually is the other way around. It's more 70-30 older to
Absolutely, it's
younger
rapid reversing. Yeah.
and stuff. And I didn't even realize that Nigeria alone was going to surpass it that much. That's pretty
Mm.
significant. And it's so important um to nurture and nourish and whatever words you want to use the young talent with education, with opportunities, with tech, etc., to be able to take it to that next level. We're even talking to people in Saudi Arabia, which is also an amazingly young population that's also, looking at that. How do you see the positive impact of AI on the health tech, arena? And I'll just add something to it there. The balance of, because we talk a lot about AI and how it may have the biggest impact of AI, positive impact, probably will be on healthcare and health tech because, and it's also the most personal impact because it's about our health, basically. So the young generation, next generation, looks to go work where they can make money, but also have purpose. And they want a company and organization that cares about leaders who care, if you will, that care about
Mhm.
not only their economic well-being, but their physical and mental well-being too. So I know that was a mouthful I just said, but how do you see, AI and tech really impacting that healthcare industry and what you're doing for impact investing?
So I think the AI would be the biggest sort of breakthrough, what would deliver the biggest breakthrough in healthcare since antibiotics. I think it will be that impactful. And the areas that I see the most impact in diagnostics, in healthcare, things like diagnostics, drug delivery, basic research, like the type that I was doing in Japan, personalized medicine, genetic medicine, where I see, massive opportunities for artificial intelligence.
What about we have a client that does predictions and it's a new client that we're working with and they have AI experts and PhDs put on their model on their platform
Mm.
to predict things, and it's the economic models. They started out with sports, then they're going to crypto, but they're going to be moving into healthcare, and it's fascinating that the doctors will have predictions, if you will, on what to do with a patient based on the information AI is coming up with about what diagnosis may they have or whatever type of thing. Um, it's fascinating. There's going to be so much data, so much information that doctors will have to choose, do we do this surgery or that surgery maybe, or who knows, they're way more expert on me, but I found it fascinating that that is actually coming and that doctors will have so much information to choose from
Correct.
to do things. And I just wonder how that's going to probably positively impact investors in general, maybe even switching from other sectors to healthcare for their investments.
So healthcare has always been like, a great economic opportunity in terms of investing. Healthcare is counter-cyclical, which means when the economy is doing badly, healthcare usually does well. And it's also seen as a defensive sector, which means that, when you have a portfolio that's volatile, healthcare is often viewed as a stabilizing sort of sector and investment. And when you look at the largest companies in America, a lot of them are healthcare companies. There's a healthcare company in Denmark, I believe, that's bigger than the country's GDP. So its market cap, it's a pharmaceutical company called Novo Nordisk. And yeah, the company itself is bigger than the country's GDP. So I think that healthcare has always been a lucrative sector, but I think it's going to become more so in the era of AI.
It's fascinating because I have I call her my bonus daughter. She's married to my middle son. I call her a bonus because they don't use the word step or even in-laws. They use bonus instead. I love that. But she's from Denmark, so I'll have to bring that up again about that company in Denmark. Another thing we're finding, and I'm sure you are too, is the move towards preventive healthcare,
Oh
to your
yeah,
point, versus
that's huge.
drugs forever, recurring revenues from drugs forever, rather and preventing and home, everything from home dialysis to home this to home that to telemed. I assume
Correct.
that's a big investment opportunity too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hospital at home. They call it the move from hospital to home hospital.
What about popsicle? Um, and it makes so much more sense if you think about it. People would rather be home in a positive
Absolutely.
environment, comfortable environment to take care of themselves, and technology allows you to do that. So with HealthCap, can you share a little bit more about um, what investors, how can investors know more about it? What type of investors do you look for? Are they individual? Are they just big, family offices? How does that work?
Um, so we have an anchor investor that's a corporate. We have quite a few family offices. There's organizations called Fund of Funds that also invest, of course, in venture funds as the specialist thing that they do. There's some foundations that also invest in funds. So there's a whole variety of investors who we refer to as limited partners that make up our cap table. And it's super interesting to see such a variety of experiences from operators to high net worth to executives to large families to foundations to corporates, um, blending their skills and experiences together to help us create the future of healthcare in Africa.
I love it. And then you're actually creating a good ecosystem that everybody can help everybody at the same time.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful. Congrats. I'm excited about seeing how we can help. So one more question on this part. One thing we say in LA is you got to keep them wanting more so you can do a sequel. So we may have to do a
Mhm.
sequel at some point.
Yeah, I'd like that.
But a client told me back in 2021, he told me the pandemic year, 2020, was the year that flew by slowly. He told me, and I said, well, it's kind of brilliant.
Mm,
And sometimes it
yeah.
feels like it was yesterday. Sometimes it feels like it was years ago, all at the
Hmm.
same weird time. And now we're already zooming into 2025 like crazy. And with all that, can you share
Hmm.
what you're most grateful for and also what you're most hopeful for?
So what I'm most grateful for in my life right now is honestly, it's my husband. Marriage is such like a cool thing to have somebody that you can do life with. So I'm super grateful for him. And like, if I was to think about anything in my life that I'm super thankful for, it's like just having a great spouse, right, and a great marriage. It brings me a lot of joy. And I'm hopeful for. I'm really hopeful for the future of the African continent. I really think that there's so much potential in the minds of African young people. It's just that talent is equally distributed and opportunity is not. And I'd love to be able to get more capital into the hands of talented people this year and in the years to come.
No, that's beautiful. Well, I'm grateful to have a new friend. I'm grateful for that right here, right now, and I'm grateful that you are a leader who cares, and in probably the most important place too, and that's people's health. Like I said, we need to take things more personal, I think, to make an impact these days, and so I'm grateful for all of that, and thank you for being on the Leaders Who Care series, and again, thank you for being a leader who cares.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.